Aaliyah Brooks had just transferred to a new school where every hallway corner was lined with the scrutinizing eyes of strangers. She came from a place where survival meant learning how to fight. 8 relentless years on the Taekwondo mat had forged in her the calm and inner strength of a black belt, hidden behind the quiet, composed exterior of a 16-year-old. But the bullies here didn't recognize that. All they saw was a new black girl. Alone, taciturn, a target that seemed far too easy. They started approaching her with subtle threats, demands, and increasingly brazen acts of harassment. Then, one afternoon, they decided to take things too far. Laughter echoed through the corridor. Someone spat out a cruel remark saying she deserved it. The hallway fell silent. Everyone watched, but Aaliyah didn't crumble. They thought she was weak. They assumed she'd just endure it. They were wrong. The alarm clock blared at 5:15 a.m. through the barely unpacked house, still smelling of fresh paint and scattered moving boxes. Down in the basement, the soft yellow glow of a solitary bulb cast its light over the cold wooden floorboards. The only place where Aaliyah Brooks felt at home in this unfamiliar city. The 16-year-old stood in a crisp white dobok, her hair neatly braided, each warm-up movement measured and precise. Every step, every kick that shot up through the air, quick, decisive, served both as a personal challenge and a way to banish the anxieties left behind by the rush to move from Detroit. There, Aaliyah had to learn to sprint home through streets where violence lurked around every dark corner. But it was also Detroit, with its freezing winters and countless hours spent sweating on the Taekwondo mat, that had instilled in her not just strength but discipline and the ability to control her emotions in any situation. The thud of her bare feet hitting the mat, her rhythmic breathing. Only in this small practice space was Aaliyah herself. Not the new girl at Crestwood, not the outsider who would be scrutinized in crowded hallways, but a seasoned black belt who had already faced fear and prejudice head-on. When Aaliyah finished her routine, Dr. Monique Brooks, still wearing her white coat, the faint imprint of a night shift visible on her wrist, came down the basement stairs. She looked at her daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. "Up early to train again, sweetheart?" she asked softly. Aaliyah nodded, wiping the sweat from her brow and tucking her gloves into their cloth bag. "Just trying to stay centered, Mom. I want to be clear-headed for the first day." Dr. Monique placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, her voice warm and steady. "I know Crestwood will be different from Detroit. It might not be easy. But remember, no matter what happens, your safety comes first. And I always believe in your strength." Aaliyah met her mother's gaze, a small smile tugging at her lips despite the knot of tension in her chest. She understood completely. Real strength wasn't just in a fast kick or a powerful punch, it was in restraint, the ability to hold back when necessary, using martial arts only for self-defense, never for unprovoked aggression. That philosophy was in her blood now, taught to her through many bitter Detroit winters. The house felt warm and reassuring, but Aaliyah knew that outside was a very different world. Crestwood, an ostensibly peaceful suburb where whispered judgments about the new black girl lingered. Unwritten rules only another outsider could understand, awaited her on this first day. Everything would feel foreign, and sometimes just a single look could stir up an undercurrent of hostility. When her mother's car pulled up in front of the school gate, Aaliyah adjusted the straps of her backpack and glanced down at the folded black belt tucked into her sports bag. She whispered to herself, "Patience, control. Don't ever apologize for simply existing." The Crestwood gates swung wide. The journey of the black belt girl had begun, a journey that only those who held on to their pride and inner resolve could ever fully walk. The Crestwood gates had just closed behind her when Aaliyah Brooks felt an unfamiliar chill creep into her palms. even though early autumn hadn't yet turned cold. Her footsteps merged with the bustling rhythm of almost 1,000 students, mostly fair-faced, hair-glossy shades of blonde and brown, neatly dressed in uniforms, wearing the practiced suburban smiles. The moment Aaliyah stepped into the main hallway, those eyes like pinpricks swept over her. In a new school, everyone knows how crucial that first glance is, but for a black girl standing alone between rows of white lockers and a river of brightly colored uniforms, that gaze became a silent weapon. A few groups of girls covered their mouths, whispering. The football players looked up, shot her a quick glance, and laughed, an amused, disdainful look in their eyes at the oddity before them. Amid that atmosphere, Chase Turner appeared, tall, broad-shouldered in a red Letterman jacket, hair slicked back golden as if he'd just stepped out of an expensive salon. Chase's face exuded the confidence of someone born atop this small-school social pyramid. Only son of the Turner family, owners of multiple businesses, the town's biggest golf course, and the largest shopping center. In Crestwood, the name Chase Turner was practically synonymous with unspoken power. Student body president, football team captain, chairman of every major fundraiser. As soon as he saw Aaliyah fumbling with her new locker combination, Chase leaned against the adjacent row of lockers, his cold blue eyes tracking her like a predator, patiently waiting for its prey to make a mistake. He didn't need to say a word. Just a slight curl of his lip and a subtle nod toward Logan Price and Trent Miller behind him spoke volumes. Logan Price and Trent Miller, two loyal satellites, shadowed Chase wherever he went. Logan was a bit shorter, muscular, with darting eyes that always seemed to hunt for others' weaknesses to mock. Trent was notorious for aggression, once suspended for a locker room fight, yet always let off the hook because his father was the town's police chief. Both of them, despite their poor academic records, had a knack for sniffing out vulnerable targets, especially anyone standing alone. Chase offered Aaliyah a polite, almost courteous smile as soon as she clicked her locker shut. But there was no friendliness in his eyes. "Hello there, new girl. You sure you're in the right place?" he drawled. A few snickers echoed. Logan leaned in to whisper something in Trent's ear. Both of them smirked. Aaliyah lifted her chin, maintaining her composure, and replied in a quiet but steady tone, "Yes, I believe this is the right school." Chase raised an eyebrow. "You'll learn soon enough how Crestwood runs. Here, everyone's expected to know the rules." He then positioned himself to block her path, pretending he was merely making conversation. Logan and Trent closed in, forming a silent pincer. "Hope you don't have any issues with the outsiders," Logan added, his words loaded with insinuation, trying to rattle her. But Aaliyah let no emotion slip across her face. She pressed her lips together, looked down, and shifted to another side of the hallway, continuing toward her first class. Behind her, the click-clack of Chase's expensive shoes echoed on the tiles, his gaze never leaving her back. "All right, game on," Chase murmured to his cronies, the corners of his mouth curling into a cold smile. Along that long corridor, Aaliyah stood out like a dark ink blot on a white canvas, alone and vulnerable in the eyes of everyone who believed Crestwood was a realm reserved for locals only. Every step she took, standing tall, eyes forward just as her mother had taught, only reinforced her image as the ideal prey for every glance, every prejudice, and especially for those 3 upscale hunters who had just spotted a perfect target for their cruel entertainment. Aaliyah's quiet presence in the white-walled hallway only spurred Chase Turner's predatory instincts. By noon, when the bell rang signaling lunchtime, Crestwood's cafeteria transformed into an invisible battleground of social order, one that only these students truly understood. Aaliyah slipped silently toward the back of the lunchroom, choosing a small corner by the window far from the noisy groups clustered in the center. Her simple plate of salad and a cup of water felt out of place amid the scent of grilled meats, fries, and the boisterous laughter of familiar cliques. Overhead, lights shone down on her dark backpack, making it stand out, a beacon for anyone hunting an easy target. It didn't take Chase long to find her. He strolled over, every step measured as though he owned the entire space. Logan Price carried a tray full of food behind him, and Trent Miller leaned on the edge of Aaliyah's table with a half grin, eyes squinted as if savoring the moment. The three of them advanced as though performing an everyday ritual. Whispers began to ripple from nearby tables. No one bothered to hide their curiosity when the school's top three stopped at the lunch table of a new black girl. Chase placed a handwritten note on Aaliyah's table. It was a hastily scrawled list labeled New Student Protection Fee. The amount had been crossed out and rewritten several times, obviously arbitrary, but no one doubted that this fee was mandatory for any student without allies. Chase smiled, his voice just loud enough for her to hear, tinged with disdain. See, there's a little tradition here at Crestwood for newcomers. A small fee, call it risk insurance. Pay it, and you can walk these halls safely. No missing belongings, no broken lockers, no tests suddenly disappearing. Logan feigned a glance around before leaning in and lowering his tone. Otherwise, things get weird around here. A lot of the locals aren't too friendly with anyone who isn't one of them. Trent, chewing his food with a sinister smile, added under his breath, "Don't blame us if someone sticks something gross on your locker or accidentally spills coffee all over your homework. Small stuff, until it isn't." Aaliyah maintained an unflinching gaze, her chopsticks steadily picking up lettuce without a tremor. She looked at the note, then met Chase's eyes and replied calmly, "I'm not buying that kind of protection." All three of them froze for a moment. Chase arched an eyebrow, his blue eyes suddenly sharper. The air around them seemed to thicken as several pairs of students watched, waiting for her response. Logan nudged Trent's elbow, a silent cue to prepare for their display of power. Chase leaned down, bringing his face closer to the table, and enunciated each word slowly. "Maybe you don't understand how things work here, Brooks. Everyone pays the fee, sooner or later. Or do you think you're better than us?" Aaliyah neither flinched nor let anger show. She answered firmly, "I just think that if this school really is dangerous enough that you need to buy insurance against bullying, the school board should know about it." Trent's eyes widened, and Logan let out a mocking laugh. Chase's hand tightened into a fist under the table, his face momentarily flashing anger, even as he tried to remain polite. He snatched the paper back and folded it neatly into his own hand, a silent warning. "Easy, Brooks. If you can't handle the traditions here, don't blame us when things get difficult. At Crestwood, not everyone fits in, especially people from somewhere else." His words dripped with implied malice, both calling out Aaliyah's background and lacing a clear racial taunt. As Chase's group turned away, the lunchroom's air felt heavier, edged with menace. Yet, even under so many watchful eyes, Aaliyah calmly resumed her meal. Her small, steady hands didn't tremble, embodying the Taekwondo spirit she carried, self-control in the face of a pack of wolves. From afar, Chase glanced back, his gaze as sharp as a blade. He leaned close to Logan and Trent, voice low but certain, like a dark promise. The game's only just begun, Let's see how long she can stand her ground. Aaliyah's calm silence in the cafeteria seemed to spark a challenge in Chase Turner's group that was even more unnerving than any terrified reaction. The moment the lunch bell rang, the three predators shifted into the next phase of their usual game, the tactic of isolating and wearing down the victim's spirit with 1,000 little cuts. Aaliyah slipped back into the hallway, weaving through clusters of students hurrying to class. Everyone's gaze flicked over her for just a second before looking away, as though her very existence was an out-of-place blot to be ignored. She stopped at her locker and fumbled with the new combination padlock, but it suddenly felt strangely stiff. Despite dialing the correct code 3 times, the lock wouldn't budge. Bright purple gum had been shoved deep into the latch, sealing the locker shut. A few passing students snickered. A freshman boy even called out, "New lock, huh?" Crestwood has some fun surprises once in a while. He winked and walked on, leaving Aaliyah standing there, a bitter mix of humiliation and helplessness rising in her chest. Before she could even begin to clear it out, the next bell for gym class rang, forcing her to sprint toward the locker room. But when she opened her backpack, she discovered her plain white t-shirt stained with dark brown streaks and reeking of chocolate. Across the front, someone had scrawled in black marker, "Go back where you came from." Her locker mates exchanged glances, but no one spoke, either out of fear of getting in trouble themselves or simply because they were all too accustomed to this unspoken jungle law. The rest of the day dragged on heavily. Aaliyah tried to focus on her assignments, sweat mingling with her sense of alienation. By third period, when she reached into her desk for a book, she spotted a folded note tucked inside. Opening it, she found, in thick black marker, "Nobody wants you here." Taped to the note was a crude drawing of a banana, an ugly insult instantly recognizable to anyone who's faced racial taunts. Each of these small assaults, each harmless joke, targeted the new girl with no allies. But what made them so effective was the silent complicity of the crowd, those who chose to look away, pretending not to see, or who feared they'd be next if they spoke up. Late that afternoon, when Aaliyah returned to her locker, she froze. A large sheet of paper was taped to the shiny metal door with neon-colored tape. In big, bold letters it read, "Welcome to the jungle." Below it, someone had taped a fresh banana with clear packing tape. She stood motionless, face cold. Behind her, a few snickers echoed. In that moment, her eyes caught Logan Price half hidden behind a nearby pillar, phone raised to snap a photo of his masterpiece. A self-satisfied grin plastered on his face. Aaliyah peeled the paper from her locker, pulled off the banana, balled it up, and flung it into the nearest trash bin. Her hand steady, never trembling. But inside, a deep cut formed, more than just her personal humiliation. It was the pain of anyone who's ever been turned into a spectacle simply for being different. She realized this battle wasn't just about material threats anymore. It was psychological warfare. And the person behind it all, wielding every privilege, was determined to break the new girl through isolation. Yet Aaliyah also knew that in Taekwondo, true strength doesn't lie in the hardest strike, but in an unbreakable spirit that refuses to bow to violence and the toxic silence of the crowd. And in that loneliest moment, a small light began to flicker within her. The quiet wound, still fresh from the "Welcome to the Jungle" note, hadn't even begun to heal when Crestwood drove another dagger in, this time in front of the entire class under the bright glare of a lesson on justice. That afternoon's English class felt heavy as Miss Harper led a discussion on To Kill a Mockingbird, an iconic novel about fighting racism in the old American South. Most students listened half-heartedly and took lazy notes. Only Aaliyah watched every point intently, jotting down thorough observations. To her, this topic wasn't just theory, this was her daily reality at Crestwood. As the lecture wound down, Miss Harper looked up and asked, "Anyone want to share their thoughts on Harper Lee's message?" The room was a mix of indifference and anticipation. Right then, Chase Turner sat up straight, a trademark sly grin spreading across his face, and said, "I think it would be great if Aaliyah, our new classmate, shared her perspective on racism. She might help us all understand her special experience, you know?" A ripple of snickering moved through the desks in the back. A few students exchanged glances, ready for the show. Miss Harper hesitated, her eyes betraying her uncertainty, but finally nodded, trying to sound encouraging. "Aaliyah, would you be willing to share?" Aaliyah drew in a deep breath, swallowing down her anger and hurt into a composed exterior. She stood, making sure not to avert her gaze from anyone, and spoke in a steady, resonant voice. "I think the hardest part about injustice is that it's not just something you read about in books. It can happen right here in this very room. But I also believe that true courage is speaking up for what's right, even if you stand alone. And a person's worth isn't measured by where they were born, their skin color, or background. It's in what they choose to protect when they face injustice." The class went silent. Some students looked puzzled. Others cast furtive, guilty glances. But Chase wasn't about to let it go. He clapped slowly, his smile chilling, then said, "You speak really well, especially given your background. I guess in Detroit they teach a very unique way of talking." A smattering of reluctant applause and stifled laughs followed. The atmosphere froze solid. Chase's insult needed no further explanation. A black girl shouldn't speak so fluently, certainly shouldn't understand justice, and definitely shouldn't stand before a room full of white students and talk about self-worth. Miss Harper sat frozen, gripping her lesson plan, her eyes searching the room helplessly. She knew exactly what had just happened, but also understood she was trapped by Crestwood's unspoken rules. After all, the Turner family was the main sponsor of every scholarship, festival, and project at the school. An oppressive hush settled over the room. Whispered murmurs, a few girls' heads bowed, and sidelong looks at Aaliyah, as if testing whether she'd break down. But Aaliyah didn't cry. She stared straight at Chase and replied in a voice so calm it felt almost cold. "Thank you for your comment. I think sometimes what we don't understand is simply because we've never had to overcome anything different. But I believe anyone can rise above their circumstances, if they have the courage to face the truth and change themselves." Chase sneered, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed his eyes. The classroom remained silent. Everyone felt that something had shattered. A once invisible boundary had been crossed. Aaliyah sat back down, her hands still clasped tightly beneath the desk, her heart pounding uncontrollably. But she didn't regret a word. She knew she had just voiced what more than herself needed to hear. In that moment, she also realized that this fight had gone past what she could simply endure. Patience was no longer enough. It was time for a different kind of battle, one where her Taekwondo discipline would mean not only self-control, but also defending her dignity. The lingering echo of English class hadn't even faded for Aaliyah before Crestwood sprang another hidden battleground into motion that evening. A virtual one where the powerful don't need to raise their voices. They only need a click to drown someone in a storm. Around 8 p.m., Aaliyah's phone buzzed relentlessly with strange notifications. The first was a text from an unknown number. "Heard you hate white people? Get out of Crestwood." Then came a barrage of increasingly hostile messages, full of hateful emojis and profanity she never imagined would be directed at her. Confused, Aaliyah opened the school's social media app. Right at the top of the feed was a slickly edited video labeled "Speech by Aaliyah Brooks, the Real Face," shared hundreds of times in under an hour. In it, all of Aaliyah's classroom remarks were spliced out of context and strung together to sound like an extremist rant spewing "white people hate," as if she were some kind of radical bent on tearing down everything Crestwood stood for. Below the video, the comments overflowed with insults and even threats. The same students who had glanced past her indifferently in the hall that morning now joined in, using their silence and fear to make Aaliyah the target of a collective fury. Some comments demanded the school kick her out immediately. Anonymous posters called her an immigrant monster and Crestwood's disgrace. Amid that sea of hate, everything blurred. Aaliyah felt the walls of her new bedroom shrink as if she couldn't breathe. The Taekwondo poster on her wall, the trophies that had carried her through so many trials in Detroit, suddenly felt meaningless when the whole world seemed to be turning its back on her. Her mom, Monique, busy with a night shift, only managed a quick call telling Aaliyah to eat dinner and get some sleep. In front of her mother, Aaliyah pretended to be fine, not revealing the storm churning in her mind. She knew that if she spoke up, her mother would worry, and her own pride and the steadfast resilience of a martial artist kept her from opening up. Then, a quiet message appeared from the person she least expected, Jordan Scott, the only other black guy in their class, always choosing to sit in the back, rarely talking, but with eyes that missed nothing. "I know that video is fake. Chase did the same thing to a friend I used to know. Don't react. They're just waiting for you to explode so they can trap you. Hang in there, even though it hurts. Sooner or later, the truth will come out." Aaliyah sat staring at the screen, feeling as if someone had quietly placed a steady hand on her shoulder amid the tempest. But that same small comfort felt like a new kind of pain. Why at Crestwood did people like her feel they had to stay silent just to survive? Why did justice have to wait, paid for with the suffering of those excluded from the game? That night, her phone buzzed non-stop beside her, but Aaliyah didn't reply to anyone. She curled up quietly, forcing herself to sleep. Yet deep inside, she knew. Endurance might keep her alive, but it wouldn't let her really live. And in that darkness, her will to fight flickered like a tiny flame, just waiting for a reason powerful enough to ignite it again. The next morning, the first streaks of light filtered through the curtains, but for Aaliyah, the night still hadn't truly ended. She'd stayed awake, her body exhausted, yet her mind ablaze with injustice, humiliation, and the fear of being utterly alone. The cruel messages slithered around her phone screen like venomous snakes, reminding her of her outsider status at Crestwood. She told herself to stay calm, but deep inside, a strange energy began to surge, like the feeling she used to get before the biggest matches of her martial arts career. Silently, Aaliyah tied her hair back and slipped her Taekwondo black belt into her backpack, as a habit to regain some sense of control, then stepped out into Crestwood's chilly morning. Throughout classes, more familiar stares followed her, whispers trailing behind, and snippets of overheard gossip like, "Be careful, she's dangerous. Don't get too close." At the far end of each hallway, Aaliyah could sense Chase Turner's group arranging themselves, loud laughter, glances constantly flicking toward her, as if waiting for the perfect moment to end their cowardly game. After school, as Aaliyah walked toward the nearly empty parking lot, reminding herself to stay calm, just like Jordan had advised, the air suddenly grew thick and cold. 3 looming figures blocked her path. Chase Turner in front, flanked closely by Logan Price and Trent Miller, all wearing arrogant expressions. "Thought you'd be hiding at home all week, Brooks," Chase sneered, his laughter mixing with the distant clank of car doors. Logan bumped Aaliyah's shoulder, forcing her toward the narrow edge of the lot. Trent yanked her backpack off her shoulder and tossed it aside, leaning in to whisper with breath smelling of stale cigarettes. "Still showing up to school? You're stubborn. People like you need to be taught a lesson." A few students standing at a distance stopped and pulled out their phones, their eyes lighting up at the prospect of the showdown. Something they'd only ever seen in movies, now unfolding right in front of them. Chase tilted his chin, stepping right up to Aaliyah, his eyes cold as ice. "You think you're so great. Let's see how you handle life outside of Detroit, Brooks." The tension was electric. Logan reached out to grab her shoulder, smirking. But in that moment, Aaliyah refused to back down. She spun like a gust of wind, catching Logan's wrist, twisting his arm behind him, and with a swift hip pivot she swept his legs out from under him. Logan crashed to the asphalt, winded from the unexpected fall. Trent roared and lunged from the left. Aaliyah shifted her stance in a flash and delivered a horizontal kick to his stomach, sending Trent sprawling next to Logan, pain contorting his face before he even registered what had happened. Chase blinked in stunned surprise for a split second but quickly regained his composure, charging from behind to grab Aaliyah's clothing. She spun around, locked his arm in a precise joint lock, and forced him to his knees on the hard ground, where he groaned in agony. The entire parking lot went silent. The sound of phones snapping photos and rolling video echoed everywhere. The crowd closed in, wide-eyed, staring at the three unbeatable bullies, once masters of Crestwood, now panting and sprawled at the feet of a petite black girl. Aaliyah released Chase, stepped back a bit, her expression unmoved, eyes blazing with fierce determination. "You guys want to keep going?" she asked, her voice resolute, not as a threat but as a challenge to their wounded pride. Chase clutched his injured arm, teeth bared, struggling to rise, but the horror in his eyes, a first since becoming king of Crestwood, was unmistakable. Logan and Trent shuffled back, faces ashen. The crowd's murmur grew into cheers. "Oh my gosh, Brooks just took all three of them down. Did you get that on video? Let me post it for everyone to see." In an instant, the image of Aaliyah, as a lone prey, was completely flipped. Standing there in the late afternoon sun, surrounded by astonished faces, she had become the new symbol of courage, resistance, and the pent-up anger of every marginalized student who'd been silenced for too long. But in the shadows at the edge of the lot, a few watched with simmering rage and unprecedented shame. The phones recording her now meant a larger battle was coming, one that wouldn't just involve fists and pride, but also rules and public opinion, where the truth could be twisted at any moment. The moment Aaliyah stood in the parking lot, cool and resolute, staring down Crestwood's three notorious bullies sprawled on the ground, became the fastest-spreading image the school had ever seen. Before the crowd's murmurs had even died down, phones were already editing the footage, adding background music, and sharing it to every campus group chat. In less than an hour, that video racked up thousands of views, spreading beyond Crestwood's walls to neighboring schools. By midday, the atmosphere at Crestwood had shifted dramatically. Whispers about that strange black girl, once tinged with suspicion and curiosity, had become looks of respect and even amazement. As soon as Aaliyah stepped into the cafeteria, she sensed something different. Hallways that used to brim with scrutinizing stares were now filled with subtle nods, hushed voices saying, "That's her?" polite greetings, and even discreet pats on the shoulder from students who never dared speak to her before. But more than that, A spark of hope seemed to ignite among the weaker students. During afternoon classes, at least 5 classmates approached Aaliyah, their voices trembling with timidity as they asked, "Can you teach me how to defend myself?" "If you ever start a self-defense class, I'll definitely join." Sometimes Crestwood is just terrifying. Meanwhile, those who used to reign as kings of the school were completely disoriented. Chase Turner no longer received greetings or laughter as he walked the halls. Logan and Trent kept their heads down, moving quietly like lone, shamed wolves, while the football team huddled in corners, whispering about anything except the parking lot disaster. Only one group seemed to hate her even more now: Riverside High, Crestwood's main rival both in sports and in bullying. At their forefront was Brad Walker, a notorious thug at the bus stop, accompanied by his 2 lackeys, Marcus Tate and Sean Riley. They regularly blocked paths, taunted girls who seemed vulnerable, and even stole from them, especially targeting the school's smallest girls, Emma Reed and Chloe Parker. The next day, on a gloomy afternoon, Emma and Chloe found their way to Aaliyah. Their faces were pale, their voices low, but their eyes held a glimmer of hope they'd never dared to feel before. "Aaliyah, could you help us? For the past few days, Brad and his guys have been waiting for us at the bus stop. We're terrified." Aaliyah looked into their eyes and needed no further explanation. She simply nodded. "Tomorrow, we'll go together to the bus stop." That Friday afternoon, the sky had already dimmed when the 3 of them arrived at the nearly empty bus stop. As expected, Brad Walker appeared with Marcus and Sean, swaggering in, their eyes full of arrogance. "Oh, so we've got a new escort today?" Brad laughed as he stepped toward Emma. "Look who it is, the famous new Crestwood hero." Aaliyah calmly positioned herself in front of Emma and Chloe, her voice firm. "Today, you'll leave them alone. This is your last chance." Marcus burst out laughing, and Sean growled in challenge. "You think you can take on the 3 of us all by yourself?" Within seconds, as Brad swung his arm to shove Emma, everything happened so fast that the few students standing at a distance scarcely understood what was happening. Aaliyah turned on a dime, executed a perfect wrist block, rooted herself, and shoved Brad away. Sean lunged, only to be swept off his feet by a precise leg sweep, and Marcus charged in, only to be caught in a locking move that sent him crashing down beside his friends. Aaliyah's Taekwondo strikes were precise and powerful enough to leave all 3 sprawled, gasping on the ground, hurt and humiliated, but not seriously injured. Emma and Chloe stood wide-eyed in amazement, feeling real safety for the first time in a place that had always terrified them. The student crowd gradually closed in, phones raised once more, and cheers of admiration and astonishment filled the evening air. Again, videos of Crestwood's Taekwondo girl circulated through every group chat. But this time, Aaliyah wasn't standing alone in the darkness. She had become a new symbol of strength and courage, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been forced into silence by injustice. From a bullied outcast, she had transformed into an inspiration for a wave of resistance, yet also into the biggest thorn in the side of those who thrived in the school's shadows. Overnight, the video of Crestwood's Taekwondo girl stepping in to protect Emma and Chloe at the bus stop became a scorching topic, not only at Crestwood but across dozens of neighboring high schools. Students everywhere shared the clip. Aaliyah Brooks, with her braided hair, determined gaze, and precise strikes, not only defended her friends, but also preserved the dignity of anyone who'd ever been targeted. Comments under each post poured in. "I wish my school had someone like her." I was too scared of Marcus to speak up until now. Turns out I'm not the only one who's been a victim. The ripple effect spread so widely that within 48 hours, many former victims of Chase's crew, the Riverside Group, and other factions bravely shared their own stories on social media. Photos of desks defaced with graffiti, threatening notes slipped into backpacks, accidental shoves in the hallways, even images of bruises. The silence of the crowd suddenly shattered, and classrooms that had once felt dark and stifling buzzed with empathy and solidarity. For the first time, the kings of the school felt real pressure from the community. However, on the opposite side of this battle, the dethroned kings wouldn't remain idle. Chase Turner, Brad Walker, and their Riverside cronies gathered sullenly in Brad's garage, once the command center for their bullying schemes, now reduced to their last stand. Their faces were ashen with rage, humiliation, and even fear. Logan pounded his fist on a workbench. "We've become a joke. The whole school, the entire neighborhood is pointing at us. Even those weak kids are standing up now." Chase ground his teeth, his cold eyes reflecting the stinging shame of being humiliated in front of everyone. They only dared to rise up because of that Brooks girl. If we don't take care of her, we're done. Brad slammed a soda can onto the table, his voice bitter. "Fighting her just makes more videos. She's not afraid. Those brats keep posting every clip online." At that moment, Trent, always a poor student but cunning, spoke up with a new idea. "If beating her doesn't work, we sue her. Our parents know cops, they know lawyers. We can all claim she attacked and threatened us. Paint Brooks as a violent, dangerous freak. Once the law steps in, no one cares who's right or wrong. As long as our parents back us up, the school will have to kick her out." The group fell silent. Chase glanced at his cohorts, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Good. Stick to one story. She started it, tried to injure us, and we just defended ourselves. The rest is up to our parents and the lawyers." Outside, Brad's house was still lit up. Inside, a fake indictment was being drafted, every detail molded by their fear and hatred over losing privilege. For the first time, these privileged kids knew what it felt like to be powerless, and instead of feeling remorse, they chose to fight back by any means. That night, Aaliyah received an unexpected message. "Watch your back. Something dirty's coming for you. Don't go anywhere alone." In the darkness, a new threat was taking shape. Not fists in the hallway, but the rules of powerful families, capable of turning a victim into a criminal overnight. At Crestwood, the balance of power was shifting. But for Aaliyah, the open battle had only just begun. And this time, her enemy had not only muscle on their side, but also adult influence and the shadow of the system itself. The first gray light of Monday morning settled quietly over Crestwood, signaling what looked like an ordinary day, but was actually the start of the biggest storm this school had ever seen. The early hallway was filled only with the sound of scattered footsteps and the click of locker locks. As usual, Aaliyah walked quietly past the rows of classrooms, trying to hide the restless anxiety building inside her. A sense of unease she couldn't explain after the anonymous warnings she'd received all weekend. When the bell rang for first period, the air was suddenly torn apart by the wail of a police siren outside. The front doors of the school burst open as two officers entered, their faces stern, freezing the entire student body in place. "Aaliyah Brooks, please come with us. You are being charged with unprovoked assault, causing serious bodily injury, and threatening the lives of 6 male students." Those words rang out clearly, unfeeling. The hallway went silent, then exploded with whispers and shouts. All eyes turned toward Aaliyah, some shocked, others barely containing their glee. She stood still, her hand gripping the strap of her backpack so tightly her knuckles went white, but her gaze remained steady and unbowed. After a moment, she walked forward calmly through the circle of stairs, showing no sign of weakness even as she passed by those who had once brought her to her knees with their cruel words. The grim news spread like wildfire. In the emergency room break room, Aaliyah's mother, Monique Brooks, got the frantic call. She dropped the entire stack of patient charts when she heard, "Your daughter is being escorted out of school by the police." Horror, pain, and rage ripped through every layer of strength this woman had built up through countless life-or-death shifts. Less than 20 minutes later, Monique arrived at the school in her hospital scrubs, hair damp with sweat, eyes red with worry. The principal and Aaliyah's homeroom teacher could only stammer half-hearted explanations, sometimes avoiding her gaze, clearly terrified of being pulled into a scandal spinning out of control. Outside, Aaliyah was being led to the police car as her friends watched in panic, and those who had once been humiliated by her glared with a strange excitement. Chase Turner's group stood at a second-floor window, faces cold with a hint of triumph. Riverside's crew huddled together, whispering among themselves, clearly pleased that their revenge plan was now in motion. Yet nothing ended there. Just minutes after the police car disappeared from view, Aaliyah's core group of friends, Emma, Chloe, Jordan, and nearly 30 other students she had helped, rose up as one in the school's courtyard chanting, "Justice for Aaliyah! Justice for Aaliyah!" The chant spread rapidly, dozens more students joining in, turning the front campus into the largest spontaneous protest Crestwood had ever seen. Quick handmade signs reading, "She protected us, not hurt us," "Stop protecting bullies," and "No more silence" were held high amid the uproar. On social media, the hashtag number Justice for Aaliyah went viral, trending in the region within an hour. Messages of support, stories of bullying, and videos of the parking lot and bus stop incidents were shared hundreds of times, an outpouring of solidarity stronger than ever before. In the interrogation room at the police station, Aaliyah sat facing two officers, her mother Monique, and a young lawyer a concerned parent had hurriedly arranged. Outside, the tension was suffocating. On one side, the powerful parents of Chase, Brad Walker, Logan, and Trent, people ready to use every connection to protect their children's reputations. On the other side, Aaliyah's small but brave circle of friends, determined to speak the truth despite the risk of retaliation. Alone in the center of this legal and public storm, Aaliyah held her head high. Her testimony was clear. Every action she'd taken was in self-defense and to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Yet in her heart, she grappled with shock and pain. How could the truth be twisted so easily? How could justice be so cold and distant? In that moment, Crestwood's fault line split wide open between the darkness of power-driven lies and the fragile light of truth. And for Aaliyah, the greatest battle of her life had officially begun. When the door to the interrogation room closed behind Aaliyah and Mrs. Monique, Crestwood outside was no longer the school steeped in fear and division that it had been when Aaliyah first arrived. Her arrest had turned simmering injustice into a wildfire of outrage, spreading faster than anyone anticipated. Jordan Scott, once a quiet student who quietly avoided trouble, had become the reluctant leader of the resistance movement. He stood in the center of the courtyard, calling out in a firm, unwavering voice, "If we stay silent today, there will be even more victims tomorrow. It's time for everyone to know the truth." Emma and Chloe, joined by dozens of other girls Aaliyah had protected, rushed through every classroom, urging their peers to sign the petition, "Justice for Aaliyah, Restore the Truth at Crestwood." Within hours, hundreds of signatures covered page after page. On social media, the videos of Aaliyah's self-defense were reshared with this clear caption: "She defended, not attacked. Don't let justice be manipulated by the powerful." Former victims of Chase's clique, the Riverside Group, and other factions, students who had suffered in silence, suddenly found the courage to speak out. From the shy underclassmen to girls who once cried themselves to sleep after hallway humiliations, they all sent letters to the administration, emails to the Parent-Teacher Association, and even called their homeroom teachers demanding a chance to tell their truth. The campus buzzed as though hosting a major festival. The bulletin boards were plastered with petition pages. Small clusters of students rehearsed their speeches, mentally preparing for the upcoming day of reckoning. Teachers, initially hesitant, gradually expressed their quiet support and no longer looked away when Aaliyah's name came up. Mrs. Monique, after her initial shock, regained the composure of a doctor accustomed to facing adversity. She took her daughter's hand and, together with Aaliyah and the witnesses, practiced every statement, going over each detail. She emphasized, "We are not only fighting for your truth, but for everyone who has been bullied and silenced. Stay strong in who you are, Aaliyah." At that moment, an unexpected turn took place. The town's public defender, Ms. Evelyn Howard, an upright, middle-aged woman known for her integrity, arrived at the school after reviewing the video evidence and hearing students' accounts firsthand. Unable to contain her indignation, she announced that she would take Aaliyah's defense pro bono. Addressing all the parents and school officials, she declared, "No one has the right to twist justice, no matter who they are. I will bring the truth to light in a court of law." The scene of Ms. Howard walking into the auditorium with her heavy briefcase full of documents, each step purposeful, brought a new sense of hope to the entire school. Over the next few evenings, Mrs. Monique's home became a gathering place for witnesses. Emma, Chloe, Jordan, and even those students who had once been terrified of Chase's group came forward to add their testimonies. Ms. Howard organized mock trials, simulating possible questions and guiding the witnesses on how to answer, emphasizing the importance of truth, emotion, and evidence. Together, they reconstructed the entire chain of events, from the parking lot confrontation to the bus stop incident, the public taunts, the anonymous messages, the threats hidden in desk drawers. Every small detail was meticulously prepared. Meanwhile, on the other side, Chase's clique and Brad Walker's crew, still posing as victims, grew increasingly flustered and afraid. Their parents showed up at the principal's office in droves, doing everything in their power to pressure the school and the police. But this time, the outpouring of support from students and parents was so strong that no one dared to underestimate it. On the final night before the trial, Mrs. Monique held her daughter close, her eyes full of faith. "Aaliyah, no matter what happens tomorrow, you've already changed this entire community. That is the greatest victory." Outside, their modest home glowed with warm lights. Laughter, conversations, and words of encouragement filled the rooms. They were preparing not just for a court hearing, but for a quiet revolution within the school, one in which the truth would have to be heard, no matter how powerful the darkness they faced. Friday morning, Crestwood's municipal courtroom was packed to capacity. Hundreds of students squeezed into the hallway, local media cameras focused intently on everyone entering through the main doors. Parents, some furious, others anxious, filled every seat in the gallery. On social media, the live stream of this teen trial had become the hottest event in the region, drawing not only Crestwood residents but also viewers from neighboring schools. In that charged atmosphere, Aaliyah walked into the courtroom with measured steps, her gaze steady despite the knot in her stomach. Beside her, Mrs. Monique Brooks held her hand tightly, and behind them strode Miss Evelyn Howard, the town's public defender, radiating confidence. On the plaintiff's bench sat Chase Turner, Logan Price, Trent Miller, Brad Walker, and 2 other members of the Riverside clique, each wearing crisp white shirts and neatly combed hair, their faces carefully expressing pain and trauma. The trial opened with the prosecution's questioning of the plaintiffs. Under the glare of the courtroom lights, Chase rose first. His voice dropped to a pleading whisper, tears brimming as if any moment he would break down. "We were just victims. We didn't dare do anything. Aaliyah Brooks. She attacked us for no reason, threatened us, terrorized us, so we were too scared to even come to school." Logan followed, his voice trembling as he nodded. "My shoulder still hurts so badly. I can't even lift it. I'm scared every time I see her." Trent spoke next, quivering for dramatic effect. "Everyone thinks she's some kind of hero, but she's really a violent, dangerous person who only knows how to use her martial arts to bully people." Then Brad Walker leaned over the table, burying his face in his hands as he sobbed, pausing to choke out, "My little sister. After seeing that violence, she's been having nightmares for nights." The reporters whispered among themselves, and a few parents shook their heads in exasperation, though here and there doubtful looks began to surface. Miss Howard allowed herself a slight, knowing smile as she gestured for Emma, Chloe, Jordan, and the other witnesses to prepare. When it was time for the defense, Miss Howard rose and spoke in a firm, unflinching tone, fixing her gaze on Chase and his friends. "Your Honor, we invite the court to review the photographic and video evidence provided by Crestwood students and their parents." The curtain of deceit began to tear apart. On the large screen at the front of the courtroom, unedited footage was played for all to see. 1. In the parking lot. The video clearly showed Aaliyah being surrounded and threatened by 3 boys who deliberately shoved and grappled with her. Forced against the wall, she delivered precise, powerful strikes, but only as soon as her opponents lost the ability to fight back. The moment they were no longer a threat, Aaliyah stopped and did not pursue any further attacks. 2. At the bus stop, Brad Walker and his cohorts blocked the path, yanked backpacks away, and roughly grabbed Emma and Chloe by their clothing. The slow-motion replay highlighted each movement. Aaliyah consistently stood between her friends and the bullies, only counterattacking once her friends were in clear danger. Not a single strike exceeded what was required for self-defense. Next, Emma and Chloe took the stand, their testimonies concise and pointed. "If it weren't for Aaliyah, we would have kept getting bullied. She never struck first. On the contrary, she always told us to control our emotions and not retaliate." Jordan then stood, speaking in a calm, steady voice. "At Crestwood, not everyone dares to speak up, but today we stand here to confirm. Chase Turner's group and Brad Walker's crew have a history of bullying and threatening vulnerable students for years. Finally, this truth has been exposed," Ms. Howard continued, her voice unwavering. "The plaintiffs claim that Aaliyah is violent, but not one of them has explained why, in every video, each of her strikes adheres strictly to Taekwondo principles: discipline, self-defense, and total control. Aaliyah is a national-level black belt, a decorated medalist, and has always been trained that martial arts are meant to protect, never to launch unprovoked attacks." She then outlined Taekwondo's core philosophy: respect for one's opponent, never striking once an opponent has lost the ability to defend themselves, never using martial arts as a means of revenge. Several martial arts experts, Aaliyah's physical education teacher and her Taekwondo instructor, had been called to testify. They confirmed that the techniques seen in the videos were textbook examples of lawful self-defense, not acts of retaliation. The atmosphere in the courtroom grew oppressive. Under Ms. Howard's cross-examination, Chase, Brad, Logan, and Trent visibly faltered. She pressed them on every detail. So, why does the video show you surrounding her first? Why, after you fell, did Aaliyah not continue attacking? Who was laughing as they filmed the incident, treating it like entertainment? Confronted by the weight of objective evidence, the defendants' feigned tears quickly gave way to genuine fear. A handful of parents in the gallery rose to their feet, voicing their indignation. Shame on you all! This town has been deceived for far too long. Behind them, dozens of students silently joined hands, their eyes reflecting not anxiety but renewed hope. Finally, justice seemed to have a chance to speak. The courtroom remained tense after the fierce cross-examination, everyone's eyes fixed on the judge's bench. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Only labored breathing and glaring overhead lights illuminated the faces of the key players: victim, accused, and witnesses alike. Judge Henderson, known throughout town for his stern fairness, lifted his gaze and spoke in a clear, resonant voice, as if sounding a wake-up call. Having reviewed all video evidence, witness testimony, expert opinions, and academic records, I find no basis for any claims of unprovoked, aggressive violence on the part of Aaliyah Brooks. Every action she took was either self-defense or to protect vulnerable classmates. None of her moves caused serious injury or exceeded what was reasonably necessary. Aaliyah sat motionless, her eyes red, while Mrs. Monique Brooks could only squeeze her daughter's hand tighter, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. In that instant, the courtroom erupted. Students held their breath, then broke into spontaneous applause, and even parents who had stayed silent until now rose to their feet, nodding in admiration. But Judge Henderson was not finished. He closed his file slowly, then shifted his steely gaze to the plaintiff's table, where Chase Turner, Brad Walker, Logan Price, Trent Miller, and the two Riverside members sat with bowed heads, their faces ashen and lips pressed tight. Conversely, I find clear evidence of false accusation, slander, and organized bullying on the part of Chase Turner, Brad Walker, and their accomplices. I order the appropriate authorities to launch an immediate investigation, and I suspend all these students from classes and extracurricular activities until further notice. Their records will be forwarded to the town's Department of Justice. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. A few parents on the plaintiff's side leapt to their feet, angrily shouting at their lawyers, but were drowned out by the chorus of community outrage. You let your kids turn our town into a joke? Protecting your child's reputation doesn't mean covering up their wrongdoing. Immediately, dozens of reporters and camera crews swarmed toward Chase and Brad's parents. Mr. Turner, once a major benefactor of countless school events, found himself deserted by colleagues and neighbors, the questions coming fast and furious. Is this how you teach your child? Instead of helping him own up to his mistakes, you showed him how to silence his victims and manipulate the law? At the defendant's table, the former school kings, who only this morning had basked in their role as victims, shook as tears welled in their eyes. Trent Miller was the first to break down, sobbing uncontrollably, his tough facade shattered. I'm sorry, I was wrong. I just wanted to fit in. I'm sorry, Aaliyah. I'm sorry to everyone. Logan Price stammered his apologies, head bowed, tears streaming down his face. Even Brad Walker tried to hold it together, but eventually his voice faltered into a whispered confession. I regret everything. If it weren't for Brooks, we'd still be picking on other people. Chase Turner, who usually wore a cold, confident expression, looked completely drained of life. Under the harsh courtroom lights he stood, voice trembling as he finally spoke. I'm sorry. I was afraid of losing everything, so I chose the wrong path. I regret it. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, everyone. The entire courtroom fell silent for several seconds. No applause, no cheers, just a collective sigh of relief and a heavy realization that this painful moment was the price of a system that had too long hidden behind lies instead of confronting the truth. When Judge Henderson formally adjourned the hearing, the crowd stood in hushed reverence. More than a few people wept openly. At the defense table, Aaliyah's friends embraced in joyous relief, and Mrs. Monique squeezed her daughter's hand, whispering, "You've truly won, Aaliyah. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who's ever been forced into silence." Outside the courthouse, those former school kings walked out under the community's wary and even angry stares, symbols not only of their own downfall, but of an entire, flawed value system that had endured too long in Crestwood. By the Monday after the trial, Crestwood High felt as if it had finally woken up from a long, dark dream. Exposing the bullying system and Aaliyah's decisive victory had not only erased the fear that had loomed over the entire school, but also sparked a wide-ranging transformation, one unprecedented in the school's history. The administration quickly invited Aaliyah and Ms. Howard to address the entire student body, declaring, "From today onward, Crestwood will be a place where no one must stay silent in the face of injustice. We will build a new culture, a culture of courage, respect, unity, and responsibility." Within a week, a bold new poster appeared on the bulletin board. Taekwondo Club, Empower Yourself. Sign up today. Aaliyah, now a symbol of perseverance and inner strength, was asked to lead an expanded Taekwondo program that went beyond self-defense moves. The curriculum would also include sessions on emotional regulation, conflict resolution skills, life skills, and peer mediation. On the very first day, the gym was packed far beyond the school's expectations. Not only did marginalized students line up to join, but even those who had once stood on the sidelines, some of whom had belonged to rival cliques, now stepped forward to participate. They yearned for something greater than physical prowess. They wanted to feel protected, respected, and free from fear. Emma, Chloe, and Jordan, once victims themselves, became Aaliyah's first teaching assistants. They showed newcomers how to adopt proper stances, how to block and defend. But most importantly, they shared their own journeys of overcoming fear, delivering this message: no one is born weak forever. You have the right to speak up and deserve to be protected. Aaliyah's Taekwondo classes quickly became the school's focal point. It wasn't just about kicks and arm locks. Students also gathered in circle discussions to share anxieties, debate ways to resolve conflicts without violence, and support one another. Each weekend, enrollment numbers climbed, and the atmosphere inside the gymnasium no longer carried the old divisions or suspicious glances, only laughter, encouragement, and mutual respect. Surprisingly, many teachers, initially assigned to monitor these activities, became genuinely engaged. Several volunteered to be students themselves, experiencing firsthand how disorienting it could feel to learn a new technique, thereby gaining empathy for those who had once been marginalized. Others signed up for the life skills workshops, pledging to help build an environment with zero tolerance for bullying. Plans were set in motion for a Respect Week, a dedicated series of events aimed at combating violence and raising community awareness. Former victims, now the torchbearers, organized self-protection groups, helped newcomers integrate, and intervened early to diffuse minor disputes before they could escalate. They hosted real talk sessions such as, Back then, I was just as scared as you. But one small step can change everything. Even a few students who had once been part of Chase's and Brad's circles, recognizing their mistakes, boldly asked to join, determined to help dismantle prejudice and rebuild their reputations within the student body. They learned how to apologize sincerely, how to listen, and gradually earned acceptance from their peers. Day by day, Crestwood's atmosphere shifted. Hallways that had once been territories of mocking laughter and whispered insults were now filled with supportive gestures, friendly smiles, shared handshakes, and even public apologies. The administration officially amended the student handbook to strengthen bullying protections and created an anti-bullying oversight committee that included both parents and teachers. When Aaliyah looked out over the full classes of eager students and saw the grins on faces that had once stood tearful and alone at classroom doorways, she realized the true meaning of martial arts. It wasn't about victories or titles. It was about spreading strength, compassion, and resilience to everyone around her. Crestwood had changed, not because of one person's courage alone, but because a whole community had come together to demand change. Springtime warmth filled every corner of Crestwood, morning sunlight streaming through the hallway windows and lighting up the bright faces of young students. It had been only one semester since the battle in the courtroom ended, yet the entire school seemed to have been reborn. Here and there, small posters featuring Aaliyah and the message, "You are stronger than you think," adorned classrooms, bulletin boards, and even the faculty lounge. That Friday morning, as soon as Aaliyah walked onto campus, she spotted a thick stack of letters neatly arranged on the teacher's desk next to the Taekwondo gearbox. Emma stepped forward with a big smile and handed her the first envelope. "It's from a school in Illinois. They just started their own Empower Yourself club. There's even a school in Texas where bullying used to be a nightmare, but because of Crestwood's story, they finally had the courage to change." Chloe chimed in, her eyes shining. "And there's a letter from a group of parents at Maple Ridge Elementary. They say their child no longer cries every morning before school." Aaliyah quietly opened each envelope, reading the heartfelt, if somewhat awkwardly written words from kids all over the country. "You are our hero. Because of Crestwood, I told my teacher I was being bullied. I hope one day I can meet you and thank you with a big hug." Feeling those outpourings of emotion, Aaliyah's heart warmed. Every scar and ache from months of isolation and injustice seemed to be soothed by the kindness and renewed hope her story had sparked. Crestwood then held a formal Inspiration Awards ceremony in the main auditorium. Warm golden lights illuminated the stage, where Aaliyah stood alongside her closest friends, Emma, Chloe, and Jordan, as well as teachers, coaches, and administrators. Mrs. Monique sat in the front row, eyes glistening with pride, flanked by the parents who had stood with Aaliyah in pursuing justice. The principal rose to speak, his voice full of emotion. Some changes come from new policies or official resolutions, but other changes come from one person's quiet courage. Aaliyah Brooks, you kindled that spark here at Crestwood, and today that spark is spreading, inspiring an entire generation. A thunderous, sustained round of applause followed. Aaliyah stepped up to the podium, her hands trembling slightly but her gaze unwavering as she surveyed the audience. "Thank you all. If I hadn't been protected and hadn't had you by my side, I wouldn't have had the strength to go all the way. What I learned most is this: sometimes you don't get to choose the fight. But once you do, if you remain true to what's right and have the courage to stand firm, you can change anything. No one has to walk alone. Every single person, no matter how small, has the power to make the world a better place. When the ceremony ended, hugs, handshakes, and grateful looks poured out from the auditorium into the hallways. Students who once trembled in fear now walked confidently, chatting and helping one another without hesitation. The Empower Yourself. Club's practice room was jam-packed every afternoon, with teachers and parents dropping by to observe, share, and help spread this newfound spirit throughout the school. Later that day, Aaliyah paused in the second-floor hallway, the very spot that used to be Chase and his friends' territory. Everything was different now. Benches were filled with students of every background, laughter rang out clearly, and eyes shone with renewed confidence. No one kept their head bowed or hesitated in the shadow of any oppressive force. Together, everyone was moving forward. Aaliyah offered a small smile. Feeling deep gratitude and hope, she knew her journey wasn't over. Yet she also knew that the seed of courage she had planted had truly sprouted, not just in her own heart, but in the hearts of an entire new generation. Aaliyah's fight might not have been one she chose, but she made it the beginning of a whole new Crestwood and a better world where justice, compassion, and belief can always prevail. What do you think of Aaliyah's journey and the remarkable changes she brought to Crestwood? If you were in her shoes, would you have found the courage to stand up for what's right, or would you have stayed silent? Please share your feelings, stories, or thoughts in the comments below. Your words might inspire someone else out there. If this story touched you, be sure to hit like, share with your friends, and subscribe so you won't miss the next inspiring journey. Thank you for being with us, and see you in the next story.